Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Primal Season 1, Episodes 6 through 10. If you're watching this later, I'm reviewing these separately because these were released a year after the first half of Season 1. It sort of feels like a Season 2 to me, but apparently we're considering it Season 1, so that's what we're going with here. These batch of episodes 6 through 10 live up to the promise of the original 5 episodes and continue showing us these tales of savagery that we have seen. I really like Primal a lot. It was, I think, my second, I put on my top 10 movies of the year, despite it not being a movie. And I'd say this was still probably, despite the fact that I can't go to a theater much this year, one of my favorite cinematic experiences just because of how rich the animation is, but also how rich the storytelling is. In terms of visual storytelling, Primal is probably the best thing we have going right now, period. It's like watching a silent film, but it's like watching someone who is a visual stylist. And of course, one of the greatest animation directors currently, Genndy Tartakovsky, would of course be very good at that. It makes sense, but seeing someone like that be able to go and really, there's a little dialogue, spoilers I guess, not really. It's not a dialogue based show either way. Like most of the motivation is either through, they do a lot of sound design. I'm not going to say it's like a fully, like a silent thing, but you could probably watch this on mute or something and actually pretty much follow it. But I would say that's hindering the experience because the sound design in this is actually rather rich. It's interesting how compelling the show is, and it shows you really have to have a really great visual stylist to get that to work as well as you can. And I think this is such an amazing showcase for Genndy that we really haven't gotten to see as much in the past decade when he's been stuck in Hotel Transylvania movies, although those are not horrible or anything like that, but they don't show exactly all the amazing things he can do in this, like especially visually. I know it's like maybe more violent or grown up, and that's not why I think it's more serious or a bigger achievement. I think more because visually there's just like so many cool things going on, beautiful and amazing things going on. Just being able to see like someone's emotions without them them visually showing you, or the amazing epic battles, the goriness of it, but also the character moments. I noticed a lot of character beats in this that the last season, and mainly what the show is probably known for, is these epic episodes that they go on these amazing journeys and have these crazy action sequences that you could never have in live action and are just like a delight to watch. It's just like amazing watching the animation flow in that way. It's just like you can't believe they came up with this idea. It's just like beyond belief in some of them. This season what I liked is more about the two characters of, I guess, Spear and Fang. I look at them as guy and dinosaur. I almost sort of, this might sound strange I guess, but I almost don't really think of them as having names because they never refer to each other's names. But I know Spear and Fang is a better way to refer to them because you can actually tell who I'm talking about. But there's like only two characters. But one thing that's interesting, as much as I just talked about Genndy Tartakovsky, he actually only, although I think he's basically the showrunner, it's his show. As much as I'm talking about Genndy, and this is a showcase for him as a director, which very much is, not all of these are actually written and storyboarded by him, which, as this is an animation currently, is more storyboard based than kind of, I'd say they're still written, but I'd say you can look at the visuals of this show and can tell that it is a more storyboard based show. Very few of these, only in fact one, is just written and storyboarded by Genndy. Coven of the Damned is co-written and storyboarded by him and Nija Koyama. I believe that's how you say it. The rest are written and storyboarded by other people. And I think this showcases kind of like how amazing that crew is, because there was never a point when I was watching these episodes that I was immediately turned off like I was or immediately noticed that it wasn't written. It was storyboarded by Genndy, which in the previous ones I could immediately tell who didn't have the involvement of Genndy in terms of the storyboarding and the writing, despite the fact that he directed it. So when you get to the first one, which is storyboarded by Brian Andrews, who wrote and storyboarded the previous episode, if you're watching this all together, which sounds really interesting, he helped write and storyboard Rage of the Ape Man, and then he does the next episode kind of connecting it. If you watch the last bunch of episodes, you saw that Fang was very injured, and I thought that was it for Fang. I didn't think he was coming back. And in this, you get to see, as Spear, takes him and like tries to recuperate him and tries to get him to safety so he can recuperate, and they go on this epic journey. I like that because that shows like their bond. There's a lot in these bunch of episodes about how special their bond is and how their bond, they have this kind of very family kind of feel about them, two of them, and how that represents a lot, and how that is kind of a special thing, a special relationship that they have, and that a lot of the other creatures sort of respect that, and they're kind of the family they have at this point, as both we saw in the first episode, both their families had been, murdered by these dinosaurs, and so they, their allegiance is like very thick, because they will fight, they will die for each other, they will save each other, and that really worked, I think, in this episode, because it really establishes, presumably most people are not going to watch the first 5 episodes, to prepare and so forth. If you did, I still think there's stuff there, but if you did not, then that establishes the relationship, which I actually think was actually really good and really smart, because you immediately go, oh, he really loves that dinosaur, the dinosaur really loves him, and then you get an epic showdown at the end, and I thought that was like almost a perfect kind of fight there. A really good episode. The one that came out, and I know I've already reviewed it, but since when it came out on April Fool's, which was Plague of Madness, part of me feels like Plague of Madness was rougher when I saw it on the April Fool's Day premiere. I know Adult Swim sometimes releases different versions of episodes. I had a different DVR then, so I couldn't compare them, but I did rewatch it for these. I think that's a great kind of adventure episode. This one was a storyboard by David Kretz, who did the last group of episodes. This episode was really just a great adventure episode. I thought it was like, I don't know, it's just a really fun, you have a zombie dinosaur, like what's to disagree there, but it is like watching like the logistics of it and watching them kind of go through the motions of it. I was like really compelled by like how fun that adventure was, because you're just like, both times I watched it, I was just like, holy crap, like it has such a great flow to it. I think Gendy's direction is excellent in these episodes. It shows how great of an action director he really is in terms of animation. I don't think there's anyone in live action who gets close to that, because he can just do these things that like really like get your heart pounding. And still, I've seen this episode before on the April Fool's Day kind of sudden premiere thing or whatever, and I still absolutely love watching this and got really into it. So that really speaks volumes about it, because it is just like such a scary thing, and like you don't really understand what this zombie thing is, and then just like the ending's heartbreaking of watching him like burn in the lava is always a moment that really takes me back. Like they've been through this whole thing with him, and then they just watch him sort of like die, and it's kind of touching in a way, because you realize you also get to see the dinosaur before the zombie thing, which I think was nice. It plays very much like a zombie movie. You see the zombie before, you kind of know this person, and then you see them rampage on. So, and that another thing that seems to be going on with this season is there's a lot of them like walking into things, and then there's like a whole set piece adventure right there, which I'm kind of like, whatever, that's what I want from this show. They don't have to like go out of their way. It's like they just, a couple of times, I think it was like this one, Coven of the Damned, the Night Feeder, like a lot of them, they just like walk into stuff and they're like, oh, there's the witches, they're right here, there's a zombie dinosaur over there, oh, we should maybe get involved in that. That's fine, it's a plot convenience. Action movies do it. I'm not really upset. It's just it is kind of funny. It's like clearly someone in the writer's room was like, they can just find stuff. It's the prehistoric weird time. Coven of the Damned, I think, is probably my favorite episode because of how heartbreaking it was, but also because this is both the strangest and sometimes I think the saddest and darkest, because you have these like, I guess, prehistoric witches or something. I'm not sure what they are, but they're kind of all around this, kind of doing this ritual, and they notice it, and then they get caught noticing it, and they're going to, kind of possess Fang and like do this crazy thing where they suck someone's soul and then make a baby out of them or something. It's very strange. But the visuals in this are so strong, and it shows like, I just love like how they play with, like, they're just so the witches are so striking. The main witch is striking, coming in on a pterodactyl, like it's just like so crazy, and just to birth these little girls so they can continue these witches and things like that. And I think, at first it's just like, it's like, wow, this is the crazy episode, and it kind of plays off the idea that you're used to, like, oh, there's going to be 8 men, there's going to be this thing, whatever. And then when I was watching this, it's like when you get to the witch who at first is like trying to fight them, and then kind of is like, well, what's going on here? Why is this dinosaur, why is this T-Rex friends with this caveman? Like, that's strange to me. Like, what's going on? And then when she looks into their past in this really kind of very kind of 70s idea of making this circle and like literally seeing into their past, when you see it, when she understands like, oh, they love each other and they have this familiarity and this bond is based on more than that they're just like, a dinosaur and a caveman going and killing stuff. Like, they went through this trauma together and they've like built up this bond, and she understands that. And then as a kind of, obviously she knows her past, but to explain like why she would take sympathy on them, we see from her past, and we see that she's gone through something tragic in her own life, and seeing that her daughter, who was given to her during this crazy ritual thing, just like fell off a cliff. And that's incredibly heartbreaking. And I think one of the things that this show, I think Primal does really well, is showing how people adapt through tragedy and how it changes their lives and how it changes relationships and everything like that. And it kind of shows her that she respects them in a very big way. She understands them. She has empathy for them, because none of her friends, like her friend witches, clearly are not there for her. They like, don't go around my baby, like, you lost your kid and all this stuff, and they're like not there for her at all. And so I think because she kind of feels sort of a bond with them, she wants to save Spear and all that. And I thought that was a really moving episode. It was also the craziest one. I think it is like, I like that the show is like semi, like, not that this show is reality in any sense of the word, but this one is like, let's just go all out into like weird heavy metal territory and weird fantasy of what cavemen could be. And I just really like that. I like it when they go all off, because it's just, they go into these crazy fantasy worlds and they don't have to like really explain things. They can just like, they do explain what you need to know, but I think it's something about narrative that we don't talk enough about that this show does very well, is like, don't explain everything, just explain what the audience needs to know. And in this, it's like, she needed to know these things, we're reintroduced to their thing, then we understand why this witch would care about that. And then it makes that whole thing like so much more important because of that. It makes, her fighting for them mean so much more to us as an audience. And if you're enhancing the audience's experience, that makes more sense. We don't need to understand like where that witch in the pterodactyl, like where does she come from? I don't know. Who cares? But she looks really cool. She shows up. She does her thing. And it's like, they're very like kind of almost simplistic in what they're doing, but almost like complex, because there's a lot played out. There's, a lot going on there. But this one, I think, plays more into the idea of them as characters and understanding their bond. And kind of, I noticed, like, this could have just been 5 adventures, much like Plague of Madness, and the next one, The Night Feeder. But they chose to kind of really let you know why they're on these adventures. And it's interesting because as someone, this is a TV show, when Getty's making this and this whole team, I think you could just fall into like, well, what's up. And it's, I like that it kind of reminds you of who these people are and why they are what this relationship is, in case you're doubting it. It also goes to show like how brutal this world is and how hard it would be for people in this brutality of these times, even though they're completely fantastical times. I think that adds to it, because you don't, also I just think the whole, like, their weird symbols and everything, there's just so much about this episode. It might be one of my favorite things I've seen this year. Coven of the Damned. The Night Feeder, which is the only one that's written, storyboard, directed fully by Genndy Tartakovsky. I know other people worked on it, but The Night Feeder is really great because it plays off of the Jaws cat people thing of not seeing the villain. You don't see what this is. You barely do at the end. It's really like, what are you scared of? And they're scared of it, but it plays much like Plague of Madness as a one adventure kind of thing. And I really like this episode because it is kind of horrifying, the one where they decide not to do anything, which almost felt like much more radical than showing a crazy sequence. It's like, let's just not do that because we're gonna get murdered. And when you finally see this thing, it's almost like it is. I think a lot of times when you get to these, it's more about the chase than it is about the resolution. And that is definitely this episode, because there's so much of like the journey of figuring out what this Night Feeder creature is. And even they like they kind of like hint at, when you see it's like the night feeder, and you see this kind of saber-toothed tiger, although I think it's called, I see on the Wikipedia, it's called the Similodon. I don't know. You see that and you think, oh, that's the night feeder. Oh, it's not. It was just murdered and ripped apart. So that was, I think, really cool. And then that shot of when everything's on fire and you just see black and the fire, that was just really stylized and really, I actually rewatched the ending of this. I just thought it was just so rich and what it was trying to do, but also just I liked like how he did the animation, how he did it from like this monster's perspective in some cases. Like it very much plays like a horror movie, you know, both. But that's actually, it's interesting, both Plague of Madness and The Night Feeder both play like horror movies and use horror movie iconography, because this is using the Jason thing or the Michael Myers thing or whatever you see from the POV of the killer. And you almost don't, it's not, in those sequences, it's not about who the killer is. It's about like kind of like being tense and like seeing this person do these horrible things and like not sure who the person is. I mean, Friday the 13th definitely played off of that. You never were sure, is it the camera or is it the person that's the camera? And it played on that. The Night Feeder did that excellently well. You know, it's just like a great kind of horror one. I think this was the one before Halloween, and that's perfect. A little bit, it was October 25th, so it's a little too far from Halloween, but it's like a perfect kind of like Halloween Primal episode. It's like a good scary story mixed with an adventure an action thing, because you don't know why. I think this plays off of what's so fun about going to this prehistoric stuff, because you don't understand what this dinosaur wants other than eating stuff and being really efficient and stealth and doing that, and how horrifying that could be, and kind of the simplistic idea of like these things aren't gonna like sit there and like strategize and talk about, you know, theories and things like that. They're just gonna go straight up and like attack people, and you have to be ready for that. And I think the Night Feeder was like kind of one of the more extreme cases of that, really. So the final episode, Slave of the Scorpion, was interesting because we see a kind of a slave girl running away from, or swimming away from a kind of a swimming dinosaur, or a kind of sea dinosaur thing, and she's swimming away, and they're kind of like take her in, and her and Spear kind of get a bond. I don't think it doesn't form fully romantic, but I get this sort of hint of that. It was interesting because, again, like, we don't know when this is, and it feels like total made up times. The idea that like she, from her drawings and what, you know, using fully visually, although we hear some dialogue, it's very limited, but we understand her name is Mira, and then hearing, you know, Spear actually say that at the end was very touching. But her showing like, you know, what happened to her people, everything like that, and, you know, how they were enslaved, and how she prays to the moon and all this stuff, like that is interesting. I'm kind of curious like what that leads to season 2, but it was also, I was a little worried at first during that episode. I thought it was kind of interesting having another person with them. I thought it might just be a one episode thing. That's actually one of the cliffhanger things about it. It's like, is this going to lead to something? Or are they going to be like, oh, see you later, maybe if we like find this slave colony or whatever, maybe we'll deal with it. I'm curious about that. I don't really know. I don't know if there's probably been an interview or something on Twitter or something like hinting at that, but it was an interesting story for the show to go into, because it's like, you don't really see, I don't think we've seen many people beyond Spear, so we don't really know what's out. I mean, we sort of, that's one of the cool things, like, you never know what's out there in this world, and it was like a whole other thing with that, because you're like, oh, what's out there in this world is like, there's actual people who have a society and can speak and things like that, and like maybe he's behind the times, which falls into like, people love doing that in caveman stuff. To me, the caveman thing is interesting enough. Like, we don't need to like go like, what if it's this time and he's just a caveman person? I mean, even the Croods 2 is doing it. We've seen it early, we see it all the time, but this was done in a much better way, because you kind of get just hints at it. You don't really fully understand it. You understand like a different society kidnapped her. You don't know what their deal is. It all feels very mysterious and weird, like the show often does. I like this bunch of episodes. I don't think I was as compelled and as surprised, but how could I be? But I still think this is still one of the best things I've seen this year. I don't feel maybe as passionate about it as I did the other 5, but I still like, I'm probably gonna rewatch them just as many times. I still think it's a really good show. I still think they're 5 like phenomenally great episodes, and I think it shows like the promise of everyone else that works on the show, because as much as Genndy did a great job directing these, showing off the other creators on the show as well, which I think he's really good at, because like there's no way the show would be as good without, you know, great storyboard artists, without great sound design, without great animators, without that this show couldn't run as tight as it is, because visually and storytelling wise it's a very tight show. It can do weird, strange things, it can do violent things. It's very much kind of shows, you know, the possibilities of kind of, you know, either adult animation or more mature animation can really do, is do something that's far more complex. And I think what's probably the most complex thing about the show is like, it's one of the few shows that like you really have to just watch it the entire time, and there's not a lot of shows like that. I feel like so many things are like, you can do dishes while you're doing it, you can like be on your phone while it's on, all these things, and Primal like just would not work if you are your attention is taken on something else. Like you just wouldn't be able to pay attention to the show or give it the respect it really deserves, but also like you just wouldn't know what's going on because you missed something. And like it's a wholly visual show, which makes it kind of like so different from what's going on, but that's what I like about it. And also that it's like Genndy's probably biggest auteur statement in a long time, in that like, you know, if you are just left kind of in this simplistic way, traditionally, if you're just like left alone with this one, you know, stripping away things that you usually have, and you're just doing, you know, visual kind of storytelling, not audio, even with the girl who's the slave girl who does talk a little bit, primarily like visually based, or kind of the sound design, not dialogue based like most of what we watch. And I find that to be like, just how good he is at it is just remarkable. You know, some of the best visual storytellers we have in film aren't as good as Genndy Tartakovsky is with these episodes. It's just amazing. Like this is really one of my favorite things content wise that's coming out, and I'm just always just like so surprised by it. And each of these episodes, I was a little spoiled by the last one just because the episode description on the TV, it was just right there. I was like, oh man, kind of like where it's like Coven of the Damned, what's that gonna be? Is that witches? Oh, it is. Okay. I mean, maybe I wasn't that surprised, but I don't know. I do like where this takes me. It's sort of, you know, it's interesting. This came out, the first bunch, and this one, they seem to premiere around the time The Mandalorian premieres. And it's kind of in the same vein of older TV, where it's like, what adventure are we on this week? And then they go on an adventure, and usually, you know, both shows I think have these really well told stories in them. And I really like that we're kind of getting back to that, because as much as we got into this kind of serialized continuity based stuff, we sort of left that, and I think there's like a grand tradition and a wonderful tradition in that. And you can see like these filmmakers like either Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, or Genndy Tartakovsky, who, you know, did his own Star Wars show a long time ago, but understand the kind of richness in doing something like that, and the kind of how transformative it is. Because sometimes I feel like when you're watching a show that is, you know, a larger piece, sometimes I feel like I'm not watching. It just has a different feel to it. You can be like, oh yeah, that was the episode where that sort of happened. They don't stick out. And this, like, I look at the episode guide and I instantly remember visual and stories and feelings and emotions I felt during those stories, like specifically, and I like the kind of breakdowniness of it. I don't know. I really like this show a lot, and this group of episodes didn't disappoint from the previous 5 episodes. I think it's a worthy follow-up, and I like kind of where it took me. It didn't take me, it wasn't like, you know, the same kind of 5 episodes, which I liked. I will say it didn't like surprise me as much. It didn't feel like that wholly new crazy beginning experience, but it's still a really fine piece of visual storytelling and great use of animation, and one of the probably the most cinematic things I've seen. I might not be able to go to a theater or anything like that, but diving into this prehistoric world is such a rich cinematic experience. I almost don't miss it when I'm watching something like Primal. So if you have seen Primal episodes 6 through 10 and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.